What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Welcome back to the studio.
Here we are.
7 p.m. tonight, an hour later, but it still feels like I didn't get everything done today that I wanted to. See, I've messed with the mic. I was just telling Ernesto right before we started, I'm like, how much am I going to fiddle with the mic tonight? I've done it this now 3 times. We're not even a minute into this broadcast. My Lord. Hope everybody's doing well. Excited about tonight's live stream. Going to be a good one. A couple notes here. I started working on my Sound Sculptor tape emulator. It's coming along. Still got some work to do. It's going to take me a while on this one. Way more parts than the last 2 things I did. I did get a better soldering tip, a smaller one that's made life a little bit easier, but my soldering skills are still considerably less than pro.
Yeah. But, I mean, you did manage to get sound through it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not done yet, though.
Yeah.
I'm assuming a problem or two on this one. But I will report once they're there. How's everybody doing? Who's with us tonight? Got Yeti in the house. Obsidian. Michael. Who else? Ty. Look at that, man. The gang is here. Okay, so this is going to be, I don't really have any other announcement stuff for tonight. Hopefully next week I'll have some more to say, but we're just going to get to it. This is one of those topics that I don't think gets discussed enough. We all want to talk about, mixing and recording and microphones and mic pre's and blah, 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 which is great and fun, but at some point you got to hook all this stuff up to use everything, and you have to figure out what's going to be best for your workflow, for your type of work, all that fun stuff. And as I've seen from some of the topics about, I'm pointing over there because the patch bays are that direction, but the patch bay thing has been a huge topic. And that'll be part of what we're going to talk about tonight. But one thing that I learned from Scott a long time ago, and I mean, I would probably say the beginning of my engineering career, Scott has had more influence on me than anybody else out there. I've learned more from him. And half of the way this studio is wired would not have been wired that way had he not helped out. All the tie lines that we use almost every day, the BNC, the HDMI, all that, the way it runs in the rooms, to and fro, wherever we are, was all because of, at one point Scott worked at some studio and they had to do some gig and they had things wired a certain way, or it wasn't, and they figured out problems to make it work. We're also going to show some of his patch panels at his studio, which is where he's at. And he's going to explain why he has that wired the way it is. And then hopefully we're just going to help everybody kind of figure out what they need to do to wire your setup in a way that it's set up so you can get the most out of your workflow. So anyway, you got anything to add to that?
No, it's really having a picture of what you need. If you have many rooms, it's like, okay, what I'm going to be doing in that room is like, you're going to put a speaker in there because you're going to just grab a cable and just be done with it. It's like, no, it's if you want to have, speakers, like you said, maybe a TV because, line of sight is not there, whatever, you need HDMI or just SDI if you're on the video leak, right? Maybe an SDI connection.
Yep. Or 6 like we have.
Yeah. So all these connectors, you got to think if you want to put them in the wall. So.
Yep. And even if you're in one room, sometimes just having, when I have people here and they're in the back, I run a long headphone extension to that back couch. So if someone's sitting back there, producer or somebody who's always kind of, supposed to be paying attention, they can just stick headphones on and listen in the back without having to come and bug me. So I mainly do that so they don't bug me, but it works. All right, so without further ado, let me find that and let's cut Scott in here. Scott, welcome, brother. Good to see you.
Hi, guys.
I feel like I haven't seen you in like ages now because of COVID.
I know.
It's kind of weird.
Except like we quickly handed off some tools like 2 months ago, and that was about it.
Speaking of wiring, that's what those tools were for, because you were on your way to wire someone else's studio.
Yeah, which still isn't done.
But you're also wiring your own, right? You're doing a rewire?
Well, since I got into wiring mode, which I haven't done much of recently, and I figured, saying I had all my tools back, I figured, well, I might as well do all this stuff to my place I've been thinking about doing.
Now, the reference to him getting his tools back are the 2 specific tools that he's referencing are the ones that he loaned me about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
What are the?
I haven't had I haven't had to pin or crimp an Elco in about 7 years.
So
So
yeah, it's Elco land. It's the old Elco, right? Which is then the new one is was
The
that
E3.
E3, which
Yeah.
is yeah.
Okay.
I did fix that crimper though. That crimper is nice
Oh,
and
nice.
smooth now.
That's a good thing. That thing was like killer. After you did about 5 crimps, your hand just wouldn't open anymore.
Yeah, I had to work that spring a little bit.
All right, first off, why don't you talk a little bit about, since no one's ever really got to see your studio or anything, let us know a little bit about what you have going on over there, how it's wired, why.
Well, my personal space, which you see behind me right now, it's a 2-car garage, detached garage that I added on a little bit to, and I have a separate control room. I have a tracking space big enough to do drums, and I have a little airlock / ISO booth / machine room. So it's about 450 square feet, but I get a fair amount of bang for my buck square footage wise out of this place. And I tried very hard when I built it, because I've set up project studios for tons of people, like of all different sizes, and I've wired some, done wiring and worked at big studios. So the thing I really wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that when I was putting wire in the walls, it was going to be right, and I wasn't going to have to mess with it. And it's been 10 years, and I'm just now like, I want to change a couple things. I just want to add a couple things.
That's not bad.
Really. So it's done me really well. And one of the things I did when I say I put wire in the walls, it's actually I put very little wire in the walls. Most of the wire in my place actually runs outside of the walls because I have fabric paneling all over the place. And I built the fabric panels in such a way that the wire can run behind the fabric panels but outside the wall, which makes it much easier to fix stuff, which is great.
Let me see if I can find an old full-on drums photo so I can show your live room.
Yeah, the live room's about like 10 by 20, not quite. So it's big enough to put a drum kit at one end and get a decent, room sound. I've done a couple full band records in here, but it's a little cozy for that.
So let me ask you this then: when you were, let's just start with yours, and then we'll work out to everybody else. When you were building your studio, you do a wide variety of work. You've got band stuff, you have TV stuff, you have some composing stuff that you do with Charlie when he comes over. What were the considerations when you sat down to think about what you needed to have in your, whether it was in your live room, your little airlock ISO, or your control room? How did you sit down and map that out?
Well, when I've done places for other people, I learned pretty much every way to do it, how you shouldn't do it. Because this is something that most people never put any thought. There's two things people never put thought into in their home studios: wiring and lighting. Right? My two pet peeves are nobody puts enough wire in, and nobody puts some work lighting. It's nice to have the moody lighting, and that's usually what I have on when I'm working. But if I need to fix something, or if I have musicians over who are reading charts, I need to be able to light the place up. So I have a whole second set of lighting in here that I can just, it's like a movie theater where, between movies when they're cleaning up, they turn on the fluorescence so they can actually see what they're doing. That's what my stuff's not fluorescent, but, so I actually have a workable amount of light when I need it. And then as far as the wiring goes, I put, at least 2 of everything going everywhere, because I have 3 distinct spaces in here, right? I got the tracking space, I got the control room, I got the ISO. So I basically I have 24 tie lines coming from the tracking space that patch directly into my mic preamps. So those don't go through the patch bay, because if I need to put something in a different mic preamp, I just go out and do it at the panel, right? And the reason I did that was just to eliminate that point of failure. And my place is so small, if it was Abbey Road or something, where you don't need to go walk 100 feet to change a mic, that's silly. But here it's literally right around the corner.
Yeah, you eliminated one area where you can have problems.
Yeah, and that's the last place you want a problem too. So the 24 tie lines go straight into the mic preamps, and then all the mic preamps go to the patch bay. All my console inputs go to the patch bay. All my outboard goes to the patch bay, and my tie lines all go. The audio tie lines actually go. I have a 2-channel two channels of audio looping through every space, right? So I have a tie line in the control room, two tie lines in the control room. They go to the ISO booth and go out to the live room. And then I can patch those through the panel into the mic pre's too. Because if those showed up at the patch bay, I couldn't get them to the mic pre's.
Right.
And then I have two speaker lines also on a loop running to all three places. So if I can have, like, I'm a guitar player, obviously. So I have my heads. My heads are right here, just out of frame probably. I don't think you can see them. My heads are right here, and then I got speaker cabinets in the live room. So I can patch my heads into my cabinets in the control room, like, you know, most guys like to do. And then I have MIDI lines running in every room, two MIDI lines, which I don't think I've ever used, but they're there if I need them. And I have video lines going to every room.
What type of video line?
I've used those.
What type of video line?
Just a BNC. Just BNC going in every room. And then I have, like, from the computer, I have a big plasma screen up above here. So I have an HDMI from the computer running there. And then I have a box that'll take a tap of that, turn it into standard def, and pipe it out the BNCs. So if I need a monitor, like if I need a conductor monitor in the tracking room or whatever, I can give him a little monitor and he can see his picture, you know, if he's running streamers and stuff like that, which I've actually used a few times. We used it when we were doing the voiceover stuff too for the video game. I was piping the picture out to the talent. Yeah, so that's come in handy. The only thing I wish I'd put in that I didn't was some HDMI, which kind of, you know, it wasn't really a thing then like it is now, so I don't feel too bad about missing that.
We just added HDMI. Man, I am looking. I have no photos from the full-on drums on this laptop. I cannot believe it.
But the HDMI would be nice because then I could run high-def video out there. And you know, I have a set of studio speakers in the tracking space that I wired in when I built the place. There's actually, I don't even know if I told you this, Charlie, but there's actually sets of wire from the machine area up into my wall where I can run biamped mains if I ever wanted to put big mains in and biamp them. There's actually wire in the walls for it.
Oh, really?
It's just sitting in the walls. I never did it, but I figured, you know, the extra $10 it was going to cost me in wire, like, why not?
So basically what you did is you knew you were going to have a varied type of work, you know, depending on what. So you sat down and basically, I'm assuming, made some sort of list, had some sort of, you know, list of what you knew you need to have in there, and then kind of in what rooms.
Yeah.
And then you implemented that so that way, you know, even if you only had a composer and needed to pump stuff in, you know, or for a VO once a year, you don't have to sit there and go run cable all over the place, have doors open, that sort of thing.
No, I never have to run cable under a door. The only time I ever run a cable under the door, let me think if I ever, I don't think, well, I have a slider, so it's hard to do for the one, but I think I've run an amplifier under the door for some reason one time, you know, but basically never, you know. When I did a Mark's album, he was in the ISO booth with a head playing guitar, and he was running into my ISO cabinet. But I have the speaker lines in the ISO booth too, so I just even that I didn't have to run under the door.
So as a guitar player, and that's how you write too, you've thought, and this could be something that any of you guys could do at home as well. Even if you're in your home studio, you could, you know, convert a closet or another room down the hall or something like that by running some speaker and regular tie lines. That would allow you to isolate, you know, any sort of, you could have a head in the room with you, you could have the cab in another one, you could have the cab and the head in another room, and it would allow you to have some isolation so you can actually hear what your microphones are picking up, which for you, Scott, works great. And we installed that here because of your setup.
I mean, the speaker, I have two speaker lines, which is sufficient. If it was a big commercial, if I was doing a commercial installation, I'd do more, because like when I worked at Third Stone, we'd have metal bands in there, and they'd have, you know, like half a dozen heads in the control room, like all running, you know. It was nuts. So I think we had 6 speaker tie lines.
Holy crap! Really?
There were times when we ran out of tie lines and had to run stuff around the door and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Damn.
Because, you know, those guys would go nuts. Yeah, you can never have too much of that stuff. But yeah, if you're a guitar player, I mean, honestly, I don't really use them that much because, like, usually I'm in a hurry and I'm using a plug-in. But I can run, two heads into two different cabinets anytime I need to, and mic them up. Or a lot of times I'll be reamping stuff. That makes it a little easier.
Here, I'm gonna pull up the photo of your.
I did remember. I do recall. I have used the MIDI tie line. We use it on Mark's record.
I've used. I took it out one time, but I actually for a few times with keyboard players I used it when we would track especially some guys came in and maybe the sounds weren't so great, you could do what you needed to later.
Yeah.
But I only used it few times
and with MIDI you can always cheat and run it down a mic line too.
Really?
Yeah, because you only use the middle. It's a 5-pin plug, but you only use the middle. You can only use the middle 3, so you can get a little adapter and run MIDI down a mic line.
Oh.
So you can cheat and do that too.
Holy crap! I didn't know that. All right, I got it. Yeah, I got more cables to make.
Yeah, like when I do my MIDI, whenever I make MIDI, whenever I wire MIDI, I just use the same. I use the same cable that I use for mic lines.
Oh.
My good old Canary L2B. Here I have a piece right here. I'll show you my Canary L2B2 AT.
Yeah, that stuff is handy and easy to work with. I think I got a different variation of that I just built a bunch of cables with. Oh yeah.
I have a reel. So my wiring.
If you buy it that way too, you save a ton of dough buying it in those reels, man. Holy crap.
Yeah. How long are these? It's 200 meters.
Yeah, you can wire quite a bit of stuff with that actually.
Yeah. Yeah, you can make a lot.
I got a question here. Do you do any separation between speaker lines and signal lines when you go in the wall?
If you can, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try to keep them separate. Try to keep them as far apart as you can, and if they cross each other, try and get them to cross at a 90-degree angle whenever you can, so that there's no inductance happening. It's not always possible, and it's not the end of the world, but if you can, try and run the speaker stuff and the AC stuff, and keep it as far away from the audio stuff as you can.
Would you do that same with the speaker and a mic line?
Yeah. Yeah, just keep the mic lines. Basically, keep the mic lines away from everything else, and then that's a good rule of thumb.
There you go. Perfect.
Or digital stuff.
That's the one thing that I wish we would have been able to do here. Is I have a spot over in the corner where they come together for a bit, but it's like an 8-foot, maybe a 10-foot run at the most, and I've never noticed an issue because it's short.
Yeah. It usually doesn't cause too much trouble. And the other thing is if you are going to run wire through walls and stuff. Put in conduit, put in 2-inch, at least 2 or 4-inch conduit, and, so you can actually run the wire. So if you need to run another piece of wire later, you can get it, you put a stretch of conduit that goes wherever you need to go, and then get a piece of rope or string or something that's twice as long as the conduit and tie it off on each end. And then you got something you can use, you got something to pull with, and then you have no trouble getting wire through.
I've used drumsticks like that in the short walls.
Yeah.
To drumstick, stick
Whatever
it through, someone pulls it out the other side.
Yeah, but it's a pain in the ass to fishing, putting a fish line through to pull a new piece of cable. When you put the stuff in, just get a piece of string and just make sure it's twice as long as the conduit and it's tied off on each end so it doesn't get lost, and you're done.
That's a good idea.
And for a smaller place like this size place, how long is it going to be? 5 feet?
Right. Do you have that in your wall? There, going from through your ISO?
Yeah, I have a piece of conduit. In the corner, the control room, the tracking room, and the ISO booth. This corner is where all the wire meets, and I have a piece of conduit that goes
cut that in.
up into the ceiling and over the ceiling and down into where all the machines are, and then I have a conduit that goes from the floor up to that conduit.
So
there's sort of
the photo that's coming in there now that Scott's talking about.
There it is.
See on the right photo is in his tracking room, and the left photo is in the corner that he's talking about in his ISO.
Yeah, so you see I got the 24 mic lines. I got 4 headphone sends. I have 2. Oh yeah, I have instrument tie lines. Sorry, I forgot about it. Yeah, I have 2 instrument tie lines, 1/4-inch instrument tie lines, 2 amplifier tie lines, the 4 audio tie lines coming from different places, and then the BNCs, the MIDI, and what's the other one? Oh yeah, those are the instrument lines up on the top there. Yeah. And then in this other that long skinny, the tall skinny one, which is just a 19-inch panel put sideways because I only had that little spot. That's in the ISO booth, which is only, what's that, like 7 feet away from the other panel, but that way I don't ever have to run anything through the door. And it's got all the same, it's got the speaker ties, 2 more headphone lines. I have 6 headphone sends altogether. I have 4 headphone sends that go out to the main space. And then I have, in the ISO booth, I have 4 and 5. So if somebody wants to share one with somebody in the tracking space, they can do that. And then in the control room, I have 5 and 6. So I can run separate headphone sends for other people in the control room, so they don't have to listen to what I'm listening to if they don't want.
Oh, that's nice.
Which I've done. I've done that. And I have one of those pre-Sonus 6-channel headphone amps, which is a great headphone amp. So you can run 2 stereo inputs and balance them. So usually I have like the 2 mix on one and the click on the other. So I can give everybody however much click they want. And then each one has its own insert as well. So right. Because on my console, I go digital into Pro Tools off my console, but then I have the buses the analog bus outputs feeding the headphone amp. So I just put, if somebody's on headphone 1, I make sure they're on bus 1, and then I can give them more of themselves. And I can do that for everybody. And that works really well. So I can't give everybody a completely separate headphone mix, but I can generally tweak everybody's mix to where they're happy.
I've never had a problem with headphones tracking at your place. It's always sounded good. I mean,
well, that's another thing that not most people don't put enough thought into when they're putting a place together. Mm-hmm. I mean, my goal was to basically set up my place like a little tiny commercial recording studio. Right. It's little tiny, but it has all the stuff you'd want to see in a commercial place.
It's all about it's about workflow. So when you get in there, this stuff is set up so you're not sitting there trying to, someone's like, "Oh, my headphones aren't right now." You're trying to figure out why or how to get more headphones to someone, or how to, "Oh, I need a guitar amp in that room, but the player wants to sit in this room. Shit, how do I make that happen?" You don't have to think about any of that. It's all there, so you can just work and create. And in your case, you're doing a lot of TV stuff where time is money. I mean, you're moving fast.
I'm in a furious hurry most of the time, so yeah. Or I'm doing something overnight. It's like
right.
I get the call at the end of the day, like, "Hey, we need this by tomorrow." Oh, okay, great.
Right.
Didn't want to go to bed tonight.
So hey, Scott, there's a question here. Someone's asking, what material for Conduit? We used PVC in
just
ours
get
here.
the black, like the black PVC pipe, but anything, like any sort of pipe. If you can swing it, it's not always possible, but if you can avoid like a 90-degree corner, sometimes it's easier to pull wire through, because that's the spot where it'll get tight. Mm-hmm. So if you could do like 245s or something instead of a 90, it's like much easier to pull wire. But yeah, like just 2-inch, 4-inch, whatever you got, however much you think you need, double it.
Yeah, that's.
You stick one piece of 24 pair in a 2-inch conduit, and that sucker's done.
We have 4-inch conduit here, and it literally. How full is it right now? We're 85%, almost 90% full. So we're trying to pull all this new BNC through the wall, and it was not easy.
Yeah, like here's a piece of 32 pair, so it's that big around,
Oh yeah.
This piece.
Once you get that, and then you get a few other things in the wall, that'll fill up fast.
Yeah. And if it has to go around a corner, then it's really tight.
Right.
And if you're pulling a bunch of stuff through, like put in the multi-pair first, and then pull the other stuff around it, because it's easier to get all that small stuff around the corner.
But that's where planning ahead really, I think, comes in, and I think you're so right on. Once you think you know what you need, double it. And I wish I kind of would have thought it that far ahead here when we initially did, the install. Because it did get harder to start pairing, putting more through the walls. It's like at that time, I think we had, 20-some all outboard gear, right? Mm-hmm. So we put in exactly that amount. Boy, that was not the right thing to do. It just made made the job so much harder, a year later when we're like, oh, crap, now I got to put this in, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah, like if you're putting a studio together, like it goes without saying that, in the coming years, you're going to buy more crap, So Just be ready to put it in. Like, who builds like a recording studio for themselves and then doesn't buy more crap later? You know, like that's never happened.
Right, exactly. There's always something else to buy.
Yeah. Another thing I would put in if I was doing this right now and not 10 years ago is I'd put like Cat 6 everywhere too. Like I know you have a bunch of Cat.
Yeah, I got a bunch of that
Cat
through the
6
walls.
running in
Yeah.
place. A lot of the headphone systems and stuff, they use it now. And I have a little bit of Cat 6 running between my computer and some of my stuff, but I don't have like Cat 6 going everywhere. And I haven't needed it yet, but you know, Cat 6 is going to be
I think there's going to be a lot more of that in the future. You know, with Focusrite, you got Mo2 really pushing that way.
Yeah, so why not? I mean,
all the live,
literally
like the Behringer Live stuff, the Presonus, all that stuff is running Ethernet.
And it's like literally the cheapest kind of wire you can run pretty much, so why not?
Yeah, exactly. I saw someone I just wanted to touch on earlier. I'm looking over at Ernesto's computer because I can't see mine, though it's right in front of me. There was some talk of HDMI and length and all that. That really depends kind of on what you're using it for. If you're running stuff to, from a computer to a TV, you can get a lot longer line. If you're doing live streaming like us, we have found time and time again, once you hit 25 feet, it's a crapshoot whether it's going to work or not. Yeah. We've tried HDMI over Ethernet, did not work with the cameras to the switch. And every switch is different. I've done this with the Sling Studio, and sometimes it works. Sometimes the Blackmagic, it doesn't work. So you really have to kind of test it out a little bit. That's why here we go short HDMI runs to we're all 3G SDI at the moment, but we go we're 2-foot cables, 3-foot HDMI at the most out of the cameras, right into a Blackmagic microconverter into SDI and all the way in here to the switch. Because you can run, I think, up to 300 feet on BNC over the SDI before you start losing any signal, which is way more run than we have here.
It's plenty far, yeah. Yeah, see, I didn't really wire my place. Like, I have video lines running for utility, but, like, I did not design my place with shooting video in mind at all. Right. So if I had that in mind, like, I don't really have enough room anyway, but, yeah, that's a whole other nightmare is dealing with all the video.
I have one HDMI line that goes from the main computer right here into the ISO, and that's where we did all the voiceover stuff. So I can run I can mirror my screen with, I think that we did the Gears of, Scott did some of this too, Gears of War 5, all the Portuguese stuff. And so we had a screen out. I had 2 screens out there for the guy, one with the dialogue, because they were small screens, and one so he could see the waveforms. And then everything else were HDMI or were BNC to the main room, right, Ernesto? We don't have HDMI in there. But the back ISO that is it's almost done. It's usable now, but I'm getting it to where we can have people in there. I don't have line of sight there, and where the door is a very, even if I put windows in it, all you do is see directly across the room and no one in it. So I put HDMI. It's like 4-foot HDMI runs where we can plug a GoPro and a monitor in on both sides. So there's 2 HDMI runs. If you have someone actually in that back ISO, you could have total line of sight both ways, and you just point the camera wherever you need it.
Yeah, well, that's like one of the guys I've been working with a lot lately. Like he's a drummer, and his room's downstairs, the control room's upstairs, and we have like a couple of, 2 plasma screens with like those little nanny cams, or like those little like dome.
Yep.
With like the infrared in them and all that. I don't know cameras that well, but just a couple of those, and it works fine, and we can see each other, and it's good too because he gives me a lot of visual cues like while we're recording and playing and stuff. So I got to be able to see him, and
that's something you could.
And I can cue him.
Sorry, go ahead.
Like I cue him a lot too. Like I'll put the song in, and I'll grid the song out, and I'll put markers for all the sections and stuff, and I'll like wave him into sections, and 8 bars left, 4 bars left, so he doesn't have to look at his chart,
right?
And you can mow down songs pretty quick that way, actually.
That's a good way if you're at a home studio, too, to isolate different rooms instead of cutting holes in the wall and putting in windows and stuff. Just run, some simple, if they're not too far away, you can get away with HDMI, whatever, and you can have instant view. I worked at YouTube a few years ago, down at YouTube Studios, which was great unless you were doing audio. I mean, all the video stages were, oh my Lord, and we were in a freaking closet. That was their studio. It was literally a converted closet, and they had I think one of the TVs was even black and white. I didn't even know you could get that now. A normal TV was
you'd
black
have to
and
go
white.
out of your way to find a black and white.
But
TV.
that's what they had in there. It was line of sight, one direction. We could see who was in the converted closet / live room, and they couldn't see us.
That was basically just a big like Vafangould audio. That's what.
Yeah, it was. Oh man, and it was wired so bad that the ground hum in everything was so bad. I literally took part of their panel apart. I worked there 3 days in a row on this huge YouTube children's show, and by the end of the second day, I was so mad with them. I was just rewiring it myself to try to get it tolerable for the artist in there. By the time I was done, I should have sent him a bill. I'm like, man, you're YouTube and you can't figure out how to hire somebody? I'm sure it's fixed now. That was like 4 or 5 years ago. Yes, patch base. We got any questions? Anything we're missing?
No. Somebody just said that BNC can run up to 500 meters depending on the cable.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Ty. Yeah, Ty's a live sound guy, so he would know. I wonder what the drop is at that point. I wonder where you start running.
I saw somebody too a ways back on the questions asked if the PreSonus headphone amp was just mono. It isn't. It's stereo. It's quite nice actually.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad little box.
Yeah, that's a pretty well thought out gadget as far as I go.
All right, patch bays. This is a big one, and this is one I still get a ton of questions about. It seems to fool a lot of people. Yeah, Michael, that's going to change, my brother. So, like we have, how many are over there? 6? Completely full at this point. I literally don't have one open spot TT patch bays. I think, Scott, you're installing TTs at your place now?
Yeah, I'm going to have 2. I'm going to have like 1.5. I don't really have a ton of patch points. But, still, like, I actually have, so with the patch bay, if you don't want to solder on a patch bay, I have 2 different patch bays right here, actually. So this one I just got has the small Elcos on the back.
Oh, that's the E3.
So this is a bit tree, yeah. So it's like, look how beautifully wired this thing is too. Like, that is some beautiful work.
Oh yeah.
So it's nice not to have to mess with that. But these are just the little mini Elco
wiring looks like
3-pin Elco connectors. So, you can wire a TT patch bay without actually having to solder on the patch bay at all, which is great. And then they also make one that, I have another one here.
The other one have the EDAC connectors?
Yeah, this one has the normal Elcos on it, the 4 90-pin Elcos.
Yeah, that's what we have.
Which is kind of like, it's kind of my patch bay of choice. But if you don't want to solder on the patch bay, you still got to crimp Elcos. But that's that's easier.
You're either pinning for the EDAC or you're pinning for the E3. One way or the other, you're going to be crimping something.
Yeah, it's the same pins. But then if you're going to move, if you got to move, all you do is yank out 4 Elcos, move in your new place, hook up 4 Elcos, all your wires back.
Right.
Great. If you want to make changes, all you got to do is repin your connectors. It's a lot easier to deal with if you're not an accomplished solderer. Although, I will give this piece of advice. If you're crimping Elcos, because you can get the solder pins if you want to solder them, or you can get the crimp pins. But if you get the crimp pins, I would suggest, like if you're using like Mogami or like some of the nice, like the kind of thinner wire, is tin all the, strip it, tin it, and then crimp it. And you won't have any bad crimps. If you're trying to crimp it without tinning it, or if you're doing the thing where you fold it back on the insulation, so you're crimping it on the insulation, which a lot of times you'll end up just cutting it. So then you have bad connections.
Mm-hmm. I learned that the hard way.
Bad pins. Yeah. So you don't want any bad pins. Just tin everything, which still soldering, but very easy soldering. Tin it and then crimp it.
It adds more time up front, but not having any issues down the road, it pays for that. Time pays for itself big time. Yeah.
And if you're doing an Elco patch bay, just test the crap out of it before you install it. Make sure you test every point, every connection of every point, and then make sure you got all good pins, and then go and install it.
Then You've also
very
got
little
your
problem.
DB25 if you don't want to go that way, and then BitTree also
Which
makes. Go ahead, Scott.
DB25 suck to solder on. Like, if you don't like to solder, don't do the DB25.
No,
because that's even worse.
No, yeah, buy those things. It's worth the money.
Yeah.
And then I know BitTree also has the programmable patch bays. Like one of ours, the TTs that we have is programmed with these little shunts that you put on the inside. So if you need to change it from normal to half normal or whatever, all you have to do is move the combination of the shunts per channel, and you can reprogram it without having to pin or move anything.
Right. That's pretty cool.
And then I have one where I completely cut everything. It's completely non-normal, but I made the whole thing that way, so it's permanently that way.
Yeah. But if you're going to go to the trouble to like put a project studio together, and you're going to have a bunch of outboard, like everybody has a bunch of outboard gear now, because like most people don't have, especially if you're doing the no console thing, you have nothing but outboard gear a lot of times. Do a patch bay, do a like if you can afford it, the TT patch bay is the way to go, because quarter-inch patch bays suck. They all suck. There isn't a good quarter-inch. The only good quarter-inch patch bay is as expensive as a TT patch bay, so you might as well just do a TT patch bay. But all the, like even the Neutrik, like I have a couple of those Neutrik quarter-inch patch bays. That's what I'm getting rid of, which I shouldn't have. I should have just done TT in the first place. And even the Neutriks, which are like kind of nice, like even those aren't great.
And the quarter-inch ones wear out faster. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And the connection isn't quite as good.
Well, it's just like, because they got those cards that you can flip around to like change the normaling, and so they're not really physically connected to the faceplate, so they're not as solid as a TT patch bay, and that can cause problems, especially if you're running your mic lines through there.
Right.
I mean, the last place you want a funky patch is, between the microphone and the preamp, or the preamp and your interface,
Yep.
Because that can ruin a recording really fast.
Plus, with the TT in one rack space, you've got 96 points. It's worth the dough, to have that. You get so much more in that one. I mean, if we were quarter-inch here, we'd have, twice as many. We'd have 12 freaking. I'd have an entire rack full of that just to hook this stuff up.
Yep.
No thanks.
Yeah. And by quarter-inch bays, I'm referring to actual like quarter-inch bays, as opposed to like the long frame, old style telephone. Those are cool
if you want to solder.
Devote. If you want to solder and you want to devote an entire rack to your patch bays, knock yourself out. If you're old and your eyes are going, it's kind of nice to have like the larger label.
Yeah. I would suggest with the patch bay. I didn't do this the first time, so I can tell you what not to do. I didn't sit down and actually draw it out. I even think Ernesto was kind of baffled by it. I just started hooking stuff up, and then it was, I wish I had photos of that, because it was a train wreck. So I learned right then, the second I had to add another patch bay when we got some stuff, I went, oh crap, none of this setup works. So I downloaded the templates for it, did a spreadsheet, and I actually probably drew that thing out 2 or 3 different times in that spreadsheet until I got the order. And so now every time something gets updated, we add another patch bay or gear moves around, I can pull whatever the most current version of that spreadsheet is up, see where everything is, relabel, print, label the patch bays, and I'm good to go. Plus, it lets you know where things are going to be.
Yeah, and there's no... If you're doing it in the spreadsheet, then nothing can get lost in the translation between that and the labels.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a lot. I have never successfully printed out a set of patch bay labels and not had to reprint them out before the job was done. I always find like a typo or something screwed up, or I changed something.
Exactly. But the big thing is the planning of it. And now every time I do something, I plan for what I don't have yet. So when I move anything around there, and I just finished doing this again, actually about, 3 weeks ago, after I put the last of the, new cables in the almost 80% rewire of the control room, I redid the patch bay. I went through the whole thing and planned on going, okay, I know this is coming, and I know this is coming, and I know this may be coming. at some point in the near future. So I went ahead and put that in place already in the patch bay. So once it's there, once I have it, I know, boom, it's already there. It's got a spot reserved, and it's good to go. And then I'm out of space. I need another patch bay now.
Yeah, like if you have a rack, like if you have an outboard rack and it's got 2 empty spaces on the bottom, you might as well just run a couple lines there because you know there's going to be something in there eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Even over here on the rack, I have 2 lines that just hang down at the bottom. So if something comes in and it's not going in the racks, I have something we can just easily plug something into.
Yeah, and then when you get it, you don't have to. When you get it,
go ahead. I'll talk.
Yeah, you get it. You're all hot to try it out. You don't have to like wire it in and then check it out, which is like waiting for Christmas.
That's something I learned the hard way a couple times with a few other producers that would come in and use the room every once in a while, and they'd bring some gear, and I had none of that set up, so I'd have to get behind the console. We'd literally be unplugging sections of it to hook the snakes to come out to their gear. And I was like, after about the 4th time doing that, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I need to run a couple lines in a few spots, so if they're only bringing in a handful of things, I don't have to rewire my console to do it. I can just go plug into that. And that saved a ton of time and the inevitable thing that you forget to plug back in.
Yeah. Well, if you're putting, if you're putting a patch bay in your studio and you have if you have 8 empty spots, you might as well just like make a little patch, make a little like 1/4 inch or get like the 1/4 inch XLR combo jacks and make yourself a little patch panel. Just so you got a place to plug extra crap in when guys show up. Then just have those show up on the patch bay, and then you can put them wherever they need to go. Much easier.
The patch
much
bay saved. I remember when I did my first one. I think it was one of those Neutrik ones too, but in the old studio. But I remember even when that went in, how much time it just saved me from getting behind the racks to go, oh, what are we recording today? Oh, we're doing that. Oh, hold on, I got to get behind here and plug this in. Oh, wait, what are we doing? Oh, we're doing guitar. Oh, I got to plug this in. To be able to just right in the front, just go boop, boop. All right, let's work. Just that alone, especially once you get busy. It may not seem like a big deal, especially if you're in a smaller place in the beginning. But if you start working more, the more you have to rewire and like hard patch things to make your workflow work, the slower it's going to be. And you end up in tech head, instead of in creative mode, which used to drive me crazy.
Yeah. And, I was used to working at commercial studios, so, I'm not going to be digging around behind my console patching shit in. That's not going to happen.
No. Yeah, one of my favorite places you worked was over at, what was that? Paul owned it. What was it called? Third Stone.
Third Stone?
Oh, man, I love that room. That room just for drums was just wow.
We rehearsed in there. You rehearsed? Like, we rehearsed together in there a few times, right? We weren't even recording. We were just playing in that room.
Just amazing.
Great sounding room.
Do you have an actual number? How many hours you think it took to wire the, let's say, just the Thailand part? without the patch bay, because patch bay really depends on the gear you have. But what? 20, 40 hours?
I'm trying to think what the last round of stuff that I just replaced took me. I mean, some of these snakes, it'll take you a few hours just to get them ready to go in.
I can do a patch bay a day, like one.
That sounds about right.
Like if I was showing up somewhere, it's like I need you to wire my place. Okay, how many patch bays? We're gonna run 6 TT patch bays. I'm like, okay, that's a week.
Yeah. That sounds about right, actually. It doesn't seem like it would take that long until you start doing it and you realize that, wow, then it takes a while.
Yeah, well, it's 96 connections, and it's actually 100 and 196, 192 connections because you got to do the other end too.
Yep. I remember when I did the back ISO, which was just 6. I ran 6 mic lines. I ran 1 BNC. I have 1 Ethernet. I have 2 HDMI right now, and 1 other that I'm forgetting. And that took me probably how long? Because we worked later that night. I want to say that took me about 6 hours to get the snake ready, run into here, run through, run all the way to the back, get that side, then do my soldering in the back. Because that's the other thing is you're not doing your you're soldering and you're crimping before you run things through the wall. You're running it all through the wall first, and then on the end, each end, then you go do either the soldering for your mic lines or tie lines, and then the other end, maybe you're crimping for your Elko patch bay if that's what you have. So it takes a while, and you have to be patient, which isn't always my strong suit.
Yeah, well, and if you're doing a patch bay, ideally the way you're going to do it is, you got the patch bay, you measure everything out, and then you build it all away from the equipment, so you have more space to work, and you're not working, so you can sit comfortably at like a workbench or a table or something and do the work, and then you can test it all while you're there. Continuity test everything, make sure all your pins are good, all your continuity is good everywhere, and then go back and install it. You're not gonna, if you did everything right, you shouldn't have too many problems once you install everything. You should be able to just go through, test it, fix whatever couple little things come up. It should be okay. If you're doing a connection at a time, while everything's installed, then you're going to drive yourself nuts.
And that's what I had to do after the fact on some stuff. And yeah, it drives you crazy. It's also something that you do get better at. In the beginning, I'd never done an Elko anything. I didn't even know what Elko was when we got the studio. And I remember I think you were the same, right? Because Scott came over and showed us how to do all this stuff. And in the beginning, it wasn't easy. Now it's, you can pop through things considerably faster. But I think it took us 3 weeks to initially do our initial wire of this place. There was no console. There was about half of the outboard gear that's in here. I mean, it was all, we had about 18 or 20 outboard pre's, but there was only a few compressors and no EQs. And I think that took us about 3 weeks to get everything in, wasn't it? Something about like that, all said and done?
Yeah.
I mean, now I could probably do it a little faster, but it takes the time it takes, really.
Yeah.
Well, measure twice, cut once.
Okay, hey, Scott, got a question here.
Uh-huh.
Sebastian says he has a friend watching who has a mess of cables in his home studio which constantly produce EM interference, and he won't do anything about it. Any word of advice?
Get a new friend.
There is nothing worse than having those problems. Those problems drive me insane.
Well, my advice would be to tear all the wire out and start over, because trying to chase stuff down like that
is hard.
Will be a nightmare. So yeah, like yank all the wire out and put it all in properly, and then that'll eliminate most of your problems, and then you can chase down a couple real problem spots.
Yeah, that's really the only. I mean, we had a few of those issues here, and I spent probably a month chasing down one or two things where if I would have just started from scratch, it probably would have been a lot faster and ultimately better. But if it's really that bad and it's a real problem, the best thing to do is, I mean, I see Michael saying isolate with transfer. That stuff's all well and good, but if you have inherent problems in the setup, just adding that in isn't going to do it. You got to try to isolate it first, deal with it as much as you can by separating everything, and then see where you're at. Because sometimes it's just gear that doesn't play well together. You can have guitars, if you have an old head and a new head, just the way they're grounded will cause them to buzz, and you've got to do things. When guitars in that out of themselves are giant, what's the word I'm looking for? Antennas, they're picking up everything.
Sure.
I saw another question here about where to get crimpers and like Elko tools and stuff. Where'd you get your new ones?
Where did you get the one crimper? Do you remember?
Oh, it's Jesus! It was some eBay person that
I just ordered another pinner, the gold tool from Redco, $77.
Oh, Redco does sell it?
Yep.
Yeah, they sell it, so that's right. Or Pack Radio. I get everything from Pack Radio.
If I'm local,
usually.
I go Pack Radio so I can get it, today. But if I order, I usually go to Redco first and see if they've got what I need, because their prices are always good, shipping's always fast, and then if they don't, after that, I'll go Markertech or something like that.
Yeah, Bitree has a lot. Like they got pins and connectors and all that stuff. I don't know about the tools, but Bitree has good prices too. Like they sell that stuff at not an outrageous markup.
Yeah, and if you're in LA, they're local. They're in Glendale, which is nice.
Yeah, you can will call it.
Ty says he orders from Pack Radio. Yeah. Yeah, I get a lot of, all my pins come from Pack Radio. I always get them from there.
I like this one. Measure twice, cut once, and then reorder because you didn't think it through.
Alex, I've done that many
much.
times. I think I did that last night when I was soldering, actually.
That is great.
Yeah. Yeah, the EM thing, man, that's hard. If you can chase down where the interference is coming, and it will drive you nuts trying to find it. Once you know kind of where it is and you can isolate that, then you can figure out what to do about it. And sometimes we've eliminated some here recently that weren't horrible, but they were driving me nuts because I hear them every day. And we were able to find them. It took weeks of trying different things and trying to chase it down and hooking up guitars in different places and running wires and just trying to go, where is this problem coming from, or patching stuff in here, until I realized I actually had something wrong in my patch bay on my buses on the console for a long freaking time. And I just worked around it, and finally I was tired of working around it. Once we figured it out, well, guess who I called? Scott. This is probably the best rule to have, everybody. Always have friends that are smarter than you, because you're going to need to call them for answers. So I actually called Scott, and he's the one who, Ernesto and I were sitting in here with him on speakerphone. He's like, oh, do this. Did it. Problem was instantly fixed just by making sure it was wired correctly. Didn't have to install anything, didn't have to change anything or install anything extra, didn't have to run any new cable. It was literally just, is this wired right with what you already had there?
Yeah.
My answer was no. After I talked to Scott and did it, fixed the problem. Problem's been gone. It's been beautiful. And I didn't know that.
But if there's like a giant rat's nest of audio cable and a power strip at the bottom of it, that's a good place to start.
I recently separated all of my power and mic stuff here behind the console. I've got it all power running in one area, all my mic lines, tie lines, everything else running in another. And when they cross, it's at a 90-degree angle. And that helped a lot too, actually.
Yeah. And, it's just one of those things where, you do, like, with whatever your space is, you do the best you can. And, you got a few feet of mic line running along right next to some AC, oh well, it'll probably be fine. You just do the best you can, and don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Right, exactly. Hey, Sebastian, is there a certain thing that when you're working that makes a certain thing? Let me see if I can clarify that a little better. I'm from Kansas. English isn't my first language. Is there a certain gear that you use when you're there that is worse than others? Is it when you patch some outboard in? Is it when you're running a guitar or a mic pre, or is it just in general everything? Because I know the easy thing is, starting from scratch is probably the best thing to do. I know that's not always feasible, or, trying to talk someone to do that is not easy, especially because they're going to call you to help.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sebastian. I probably just got you in some work you didn't want to do. But is there a specific thing that you're doing that always produces, or is it just there inherently all the time? If it's there inherently all the time, start from scratch. Pull it out. Ernesto and I did that, probably about 6 months ago now. We went to do, I think, one or two things. The next thing I know, we had taken everything out of the back of the patch bays, had it running, had the door up here in the front open, and had cables running all the way back into the front lounge, stretched out, re-isolated everything, pulled out cables that, they had just gotten buried in there from one day you had to direct patch something because the cable went down, whatever. Got all that stuff out, reran everything and cleaned it up, and we had some problems actually disappear then.
Yeah.
Which was nice. And that ended up being, I think we ended up doing like 10 hours.
Yeah, it was easy.
And we didn't even build anything.
Yeah, 8 to 10 hours. Yeah,
I can believe it.
Yeah, it's just...
The other thing, if you're doing, putting in a patch bay, like, basically doing custom wire for everything, building it from scratch, is that it eliminates, like all the wire can be as long as it needs to be without, tons of extra wire being all over the place you don't need. It's like you make it as long as it needs to get there, give yourself a little extra wiggle room, and then that's it. It's much easier to keep track of stuff. You don't have all this extra wire piled up everywhere. It's that helps eliminate problems like
Yeah.
that a lot too. Although I will say when I'm doing like a project studio for somebody, I won't necessarily make the runs super tight. I'll give myself plenty of slack, because inevitably, like they'll start wanting to. Oh yeah, I want to move that rack over a foot. I'm like, okay, great. So I'll generally wire like a project studio a little bit more loosely than I would if I was putting stuff in like a commercial place.
I've done that here
because-
actually, because it's moved around a few times. And now that I've decided on where
exactly.
things are go, I've started actually, as I've redone this wiring, I've started cutting things more to length. Oh my Lord, has it cleaned up some things.
Yeah, it cleans up a lot. If you're doing a commercial place, it's like like the racks of gear, they're in the walls, or there's a permanent credenza. It's like you pretty much know where everything's going to go. And it all goes back to the patch bay. So
And all that
you'll
goes
be
back to
okay.
planning. If you're building a place, even if you're doing like what Scott has with converting the garage into a nice studio, which is bitching. I looked for photos. I can't find any. I don't know what the hell. But it all comes down to planning in the beginning as much as you can to what you know you need, and then you add all the stuff that you don't know you need because you don't think you need it yet. Double the number of everything. Add some things in there, tie lines, BNC, HDMI, all that. Even if you have never used it, add it in there at the beginning, or at least have the space for it to be there. So if you go, I don't think I'll ever use it, but you know what? I'm going to leave space to have that in there so it could easily get put in later. That will save you so much hassle.
And a lot of these tie lines, BNC instrument lines, MIDI lines, speaker lines, it's not particularly expensive wire, and you're probably not doing really long runs anyway. So, if it's an extra, $100, $200 to just put like a million tie lines going all over the place, that's so worth it.
Michael, you're asking if it's, is there a good way to transform existing TRS termination to DB25? I mean, you could get breakout cables. Like if you have a DB25 patch bay, I'm assuming maybe that's the question, or maybe your gear is DB25. You could always do a breakout cable that comes out. You could have a DB25 to female TRS, something like that. I know Planet Waves makes a bunch of different breakout cables, or if you need something specific, Redco does custom stuff. I mean, I'm not sponsored by Redco. I just buy a lot of stuff from them because it's great, and they'll do custom work for you.
You could conceivably, wire your whole place up without soldering a single cable almost if you, buy breakout cables or custom order stuff. It's going to cost a lot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I don't know. I don't want to know how much it would have cost to do this place had we not made 90% of the cables.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It'll cost more than if you hired a guy to come in and wire your place, probably.
Yeah.
But it could be done.
Probably costs more than it cost to build this place, actually.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Pedal board with some heavy input demands runs into a 16-track, and that seems to be producing issues.
Okay, so the pedal board itself could be the problem. Signal flow is rather dizzying, so it's hard for me to clearly recall it all now. Yeah, I mean, the pedal boards in and of themselves, well, I got 2 guitar players on today, so we can get some answers on that end of things. In my experience with guys coming in the studio with pedal boards, especially when you start getting things stacked together, how you have them stacked together has a very big impact on the amount of noise and then what you're doing. And some pedals, you start running combos, it's just the nature of the game. It's like running a high-gain amp. Noise is part of the deal.
Yep.
Unless it's just, if you're noticing ground hum and other things in there. I mean, I don't know. I'd probably let you two guys speak more on what happens when you get a complicated pedal board, because he says it's hooked up into a 16-track and seems to produce issues.
Well, if you unplug the guitar and turn all the pedals off and it's quiet, then it's the guitar.
Right, and then you can just go down the line on the pedals one at a time and figure out where the problem issue is.
Yeah. As soon as you invite an electric guitar to the party, all bets are off.
Tell me about it. Oh, my Lord. But yeah, that'd be the first thing, is just figure out if it's actually the guitar, the pedals. I'd take all the pedals out of the thing and go straight in with the guitar first. or straight to an amp or whatever in, or however their workflow is, and see is there that same noise? Is it a different noise, or is that issue gone? And if it's gone, now you get to go down all the complicated pedal route of who's doing what and why.
Yeah, and sometimes even the power supply for the pedals can be not great.
Yep. And that's the other thing.
And as soon as you start introducing, electric guitar amounts of gain to everything, then any little leak is going to become a torrent.
Yep. And power is another thing. What you're plugging into, especially if we're talking ground loop noise or something like that. If you start getting stuff plugged into having multiple pass the ground inside your rig, then that creates its own set of issues. I have everything here in this control room goes to one. We have 3 backup batteries. So pretty much we have one for the video rig that's all over to this side. The console is on one by itself, and then all the computer hard drives and most of the outboard is on another APC. All of that runs to one 4-gang outlet that's a 30-amp breaker, I think. But it's not plugged in. There's not a row around the room and things aren't plugged in. I don't have like this rack over here plugged into different outlets so you can get all those loops to ground that cause issues. And I had some of those, and as soon as I simplified and got everything to go to one issue, a lot of the ground hum issues that I was having with certain gear went away instantly.
Did you run ISO? You get ISO grounds in your you running the orange sockets all over?
I didn't do that.
Gear? Yeah, I did that. I drove my electrician nuts when he put all the wire.
Oh, man.
He did all the AC wiring in here because I have my own break. I have a separate breaker panel just for the studio. And then I have a few household, like the gate motor, like the motor for my electric gate. So I have that on. I actually have that on the same side of the panel as the gear, because how often does that go, right? But then I have all the lighting, all the utility stuff on the other side of the panel. So it's separate from the gear, and then I have Then I have 2 sets of outlets in all the rooms. So I have like the utility stuff, and then I have ISO grounds for the gear running to my balance power for the gear. And then the computer is actually running on the other side, and then that's running off the UPS. And
I wish I would have done that in the beginning. I just didn't. Some of this comes down to even the best planning. Eventually your bank account is the ultimate decider on what you get to do. And so I just tried to make it. I took your advice and ran a 30-amp breaker in the control room so we could hook up batteries and all that and have no problem. And there's actually 2 different circuits. I have one where the lights go and one where people can plug in their phones and laptops and crap. And then I have the one for all of this. And then that's separate on the panel in there too. There's 2 different 2 circuits, completely different circuits in the ISO booth, 2 completely different circuits out in the live room, and I have another 2 circuits in the back ISO booth. Actually, the back ISO booth has one of the outlet circuits there is the same that's in the live room, in case I have someone that, if we have an amp in that back ISO, but the player is in the live room and they have pedals or something and they plug in, I didn't want to have 2 different, completely different pass to ground. I did in the beginning, and we'd just get the worst ground hums. So I ran I took a split off that's one of the circuits in the live room and ran it to that back ISO booth. That way when they plug in, bam, we're right on that same circuit, same path to ground, eliminated the noise issue.
It's potentially dangerous too, because you can have like an old amp that doesn't have a ground, or the guy lifts the ground on his head and it's a different path than where he is, and then he'll lean up against the console or something and I mean, at Third Stone we used to take a voltmeter. Like anytime somebody did that, we take a voltmeter and test them.
Really?
To make sure. Yeah, because you can get 110 volts that way.
Holy
no
crap.
Problem.
I didn't know that.
Wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, you start like lift. If you're running like 3 amps and you start lifting grounds and dicking around with doesn't take much to like screw that up.
What else? What else going on over there in the chat?
Well, it says here, if you're recording guitar and you have your amp in another room, why would it still be getting buzz? Wouldn't being in close proximity to the mic pre that the amp mic plugged into cause any buzz? It's like, well, no, I mean, I think it's just the guitar. The guitar is an antenna, so sometimes you have to move, and depending where you are, sometimes the buzz goes away. So...
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with how close you are to it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've even gone to the point where if we have it, the first thing we do is swap cables out, because certain cables, that shielding has a lot to do with it. We have actually one Cordial cable that has more copper in it than any of the others, and that seems to be the quietest cable. So we try to use that as much as possible. But sometimes you plug it in, and all of a sudden your guitar, through 10 feet or 15 feet or whatever your run is, it's just, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. Walk around the room, you know, that's why in here you get the buds. It's like, okay, start spinning. Oh, that's the spot. Don't move.
Usually, yeah, if you spin a full 360, there's going to be one axis where you're quietest, and it's usually the most inconvenient one. But I worked at a place, and they built a room with a Faraday cage.
Oh, that's not a bad
for
idea.
Guitar, just to play guitar.
Wow. That's actually a good idea.
It was all copper. It was amazing looking. I'm afraid to think of how much it costs to do, and it wasn't a small room.
Oh, Jesus!
But the whole room, walls, floor, ceiling, lined with copper.
That's not a bad idea if you can afford it. Holy crap, that's an expensive room, though.
Yeah.
Wow.
Didn't really work. Didn't work as well as you'd think either.
Alex says, Alex, you're killing me, man. He says, I find the buzz stops when I power everything off, walk out of the studio, and go about my regular life. Oh, my Lord. So what's John say?
If I have the guitar playing sitting next to me at the computer next to open rack, I get buzz. I have the guitar player turn in a certain direction, and that will get less, but never eliminate it. Well, yeah, it always depends what signal you're creating. If there's gain or any type of, you know, pedals in series, whatever, it's like all that is just gonna add up.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, unfortunately, some
play keyboards. Play keyboards.
Yeah, unfortunately, with that guitar setup,
if you don't want buzz,
yeah, exactly, and just put distortion on it,
or trumpet,
then call it guitar. But yeah, unfortunately with the guitar thing, sometimes you just have to get it to an, I guess I'm going to say acceptable level, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I've had it to where once the music's going, you don't notice any of it, but then you hit some big chord at the end and things are dying down, and all of a sudden you reach that, you know, noise to sound to noise ratio, and there's just, it's the guitar. If you don't want noise.
You know what I always do? For stuff like that, if I'm going to have like the last chord dying off, I'll hit it and I'll let it go way long, and then I'll put a fade on it. So the fade is doing the work long before you get to the noise.
That's a good idea.
I'll do that most of the time. Or I'll do, if I have like some bad noise problems on like decays and stuff, like on guitar or whatever, I'll take, you know, like the last notes here, right? I'll take this much of it and filter it like do like an audio suite, like filter it at like 300, right? So it's only like 300 and below for here, right? And then I'll do a fade. Because usually when you do that, especially if it's like kind of a fuzzy sound, like the fuzz, by the time you get to here, like the fuzz is kind of worn off. So the gradual transition from like the full bandwidth down to 300, it doesn't really sound radically different if it's noticeable at all. And then you can get rid of all the hum and get like a nice clean decay. I've done that a million times too.
Idea. I could have used that recently.
Yeah. And I've done like tons of times I've had like a Q10 on a track, just, you know, notching out all the hum frequencies to try and clean it up some. You know, it's never perfect, but that's an old that's a post-production. Like, that was one of those things I learned from re-recording mixers, like how to notch out, you know, the 60 cycle and all the harmonics of it. That's a trick. You can't knock out 60 hertz. You got to get all the harmonics.
Right.
Or the 8K, you know, or whatever it would. Depends on the kind of hum you're talking about.
And that's where it can get really problematic.
Yeah, so you got to go through and just, you know, you set a super narrow notch, you know, go sweep it around, find it, cut it, then go sweep around, find the next one. It's usually at the next harmonic. Cut that, so you got a series of notches along the harmonics to get the bulk of that hum out without totally butchering the rest of the signal. You can get away with a lot doing stuff like that.
I'm gonna try that.
It's not as good as recording it well to begin with.
But you might have a guitar sound that just inherently has that noise, and there's nothing you can do. At that point, it's like Joe Barresi said, it's a guitar. It makes noise.
Yeah.
Live with it.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, should we talk about soldering?
First off, question for you from Sebastian. He says, do you use balance cables for your own guitar recordings?
No.
All unbalanced?
No. I'm not Jerry Garcia. Well, from the guitar to the amp, yeah. Yeah, it's not balanced. As soon as it hits the microphone, it's balanced for the rest.
Did Jerry
of the
Garcia use balanced?
Oh, yeah, he had all these, weird,
wow.
he did all kinds of weird shit. Yeah. You ever seen any of his guitars with, an XLR on it?
Oh,
yeah.
my.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, they'd have, a transformer balance output from his guitar to, and they had, the Dead had all that crazy shit.
Wow, so he could really, walk away while he was soloing, yeah.
Yeah, it's if only you put that much thought into, remembering the words to the songs.
Well, that might have had something to do with the amount of drugs being taken, too, but...
I don't know. Yeah, Gibson made a Les Paul that was like that, too. The Les Paul Studio that had, a balanced output.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that thing was kind of a weird... It was kind of an abomination of a guitar.
Somehow that doesn't shock me.
Yeah.
Yeah, last big topic here would be soldering.
So, if you're gonna wire your own place and you're not good at soldering, get good at soldering first. And make sure you have the right stuff. Get the $80 Weller, iron. I forget the model number. Where's my toolbox? The toolbox is in the other room. The $80 Weller with a nice stand. Get a little sponge. Get your sponge wet. Keep your tip clean. Get an extra tip so when your tip wears out, replace the tip.
Also, just get the right size tips.
And use the right kind of solder. Go to the store, talk to the guy, get him to set you up, and do all your prep work right. I'm sure there's a million YouTube videos about how to properly prep the wire, how to put the right heat shrink on. Get yourself a proper heat gun. And you don't have to spend my good heat gun blew up a couple years ago, and I took my wife's. My wife had a little heat gun for scrapbooking, which is a little cheap one, and I've actually been using it ever since. And it's because it's small and it works fine, and it's not quite as hot as my other heat gun, which is good for heat shrink. So I've been using that. It's this little plastic blue thing. Just make sure you do the prep right, make sure you tin everything right, and then work on practice soldering technique, and get a little fan to blow all the toxic shit away from you so you don't breathe it all in.
Unless you're into that. But it is a good point of getting a good soldering iron, because the cheap ones make the job harder.
Yeah, and you need a fine tip. To do this kind of work, you need a very fine, you can't use one of those big fat, leaded glass suckers. That shit's not gonna
When
work.
I built that microphone live, I had a tip that was twice the size that should have been, and I didn't have the I think the 0.5 millimeter or whatever it was, and I ordered that later, and that's what I've been soldering with ever since. And it's made my life so much easier when you get especially on a PCB where you have a lot of things next to each other. An XLR cable is a bit more forgiving. TRS cable a bit more forgiving, but when you're getting tight spaces,
you can't really burn stuff. On a PC board, you can burn stuff real easy. You can melt
especially
caps,
old PCBs.
Burn traces off, and Paul used to yell.
I won't fix my SPX 90 because I'm too afraid that I'll melt the PCB, that old PCB. The new ones are pretty tough, but man, that old one, you just get the iron even close there, you see the thing just fucking melting. Makes me scared. So
yeah, and those things weren't designed to be worked on by hand anyway. Those were designed to be, those were soldered by machine. The industrial machines. Those are. Have you ever seen how one of those machines works?
Yeah, it's cool actually.
With the parts, the the rolling like sea of solder, and it just kind of skims over the top, like that whole thing.
I wish I could solder like that.
Yeah.
So, hey, where's that question? John asks, what wattage iron is ideal for wiring? 15 watt, 20 watt,
Forget
24,
what mine
25,
is.
whatever it takes. Wait, no. Yeah. What movie is that?
Oh,
Pretty. What model soldering? Let me look up.
I
what
have a
model
knockoff.
soldering iron
It's a Veller or something. It's not a Weller, but I got it over at
It's a Feller.
I think it's Veller or Valor or something like that. I got it.
You can spring for the Meller.
They had it on sale at All Electronics. It was like $45. It served me well.
Here we go. Mine's is it a 50? That seems like a lot.
Is yours adjustable?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, it's 50. Mine's 50.
Do you usually just turn it on
But
full blast and go to town, or do you, if you're wiring XLRs,
No.
do you find a temp that works the best?
Just hot enough to melt the solder.
Ah, okay.
This place I was working at last, I was undoing some old ones, some old like 70s crap, and man, the solder, like, I don't know what they used, but it would not, like, I had to like crank it to get it to melt. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was like
I had that on some of the wire, the snakes I just put in on the console that I got from Apex. Man, when I was desoldering and putting new ends on that stuff, I could not get that stuff to melt for my life. I'd sit there for 3 minutes just holding the soldering iron before it would finally get loose enough to pull the wires out.
It's also a lot easier if you're gonna wire your place up and you're kind of not super experienced. It's probably worth it to get like Mogami cables, really easy to work, or stuff like it. Like the labeling's easy, the copper is nice and soft. It's very easy to work with. Neutrik ends are much easier to work with than a lot of the other ones, especially the quarter inchers. And and it's like they cost a little more, but they're generally worth it. They're going to last forever.
The Switchcraft are the hardest quarter inch to work with, and they're actually, some of them are twice the price of the Neutrik. It's ridiculous how expensive they are.
Yeah. Well, they're indestructible, but like that's the thing. It's like you're going to plug this stuff in and just leave it, so it's not like,
right.
It's not like that's a big issue. And that's the other thing too. It's like if you get a quarter inch patch bay and you're going to do a bunch of custom wiring, that means you got to like wire all the 50 quarter inchers. What's that going to cost you?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's cheaper to pin.
I mean, yeah, the most cost-effective thing to do is to get an open frame patch bay and do all the soldering directly onto the back of the patch bay. Then you don't have to deal with Elcos. You don't have to deal with any connectors on that end. So if money's a big deal, that's the cheapest way to go. That's the best value, I should say. It's probably not the ultimate cheapest way to go.
But you really have to plan
that's yeah, you got to be able to solder. You got to really know what you're doing, and you got to plan it out right so you don't have to undo it later. But at the end of the day, that's what's going to cost you the least. Like until recently, like I almost never did anything but like open frame. Like all the places I put in, wherever I worked, it was open frame patch bays, and I was soldering directly on there.
Have you ever done TT cables? Like
actually made them? Made a few, just like weird adapters and stuff. But yeah, those are a pain in the ass too.
Yeah, I went to make some a couple weeks ago. I'm like, I'm going to order some ends. I'm going to make these cables. And Ernesto just looked at me and shook his head. Then I thought about it. Man, that's so damn tiny. I don't want to. I hate soldering quarter inch. I can only imagine how much I'm going to hate soldering a TT.
Yeah, TTs seem like ridiculously expensive until you have to make one yourself. And if I had to make like TT adapters, or something, I'd probably get like regular TT cables and snip off the other end and put the XLRs on or something.
That's the easy way to go. I mean, you'd hit those points like TT, DB25, Ethernet, that sort of thing, where it's, for me, in my opinion, it's just better to spend the money and get them made, because the amount of time, especially if you're not that good at soldering or haven't done it much, the amount of time you'll spend trying to make those isn't worth it. Make all the stuff that's easier, the XLR, the TRS, that sort of thing. And then the specialty stuff, let someone else make the DB25s or get breakout cables. That way it'll save you some money. Then you can make all the lengths you need after that. But
Yeah. If I was making a bunch of TT adapters, like if I had to make a bunch of 3-foot TT adapters, I'd just buy a bunch of 6-foot TTs, cut them in half, and put whatever ends I needed on them.
That's a really good idea. I would have bought a bunch of 3-footers,
Yeah,
but
'cause
that's a better idea with the 6-footer.
Yeah, because a 6-foot TT is like, $1 more than a
Yep.
3-foot TT. So might as well get 2 cables out of the deal. You gotta you gotta cancel your order, Chuck.
I think I'm gonna order some more.
Okay, make those 6-foot.
Yeah, I'm Michael. We're mostly Neutrik. I do have. There's quite a few Switchcraft. Like I think that's what all the Motus are all Switchcraft. Right, Ernesto? We did that. That's all Switchcraft, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which they last when they're done right. They last, but man, they're a pain to do.
And then, do you recommend any lead-free solder?
Scott, that's you.
Lead-free, so I don't know. I haven't bought solder.
I don't think I have any lead-free.
I don't even remember what the solder is I got.
So,
I know Matt McGlynn at Mike Parts, they hate, and they have to use it, but they hate that stuff because the lead-free stuff is harder to. It just doesn't take the same.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever used any.
None of mine's lead-free.
It's lead-free. Yeah.
At all.
That may explain my rapid cognitive decline.
Well, we missed anything over there?
no, I think we got most of it covered. Yeah.
Any last-minute questions? Because it's about dinner time for Charlie. Everybody knows what that means.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Everybody knows I'm going to Chipotle. And guess who introduced me to Chipotle? Scott.
Me. You know how many times I've eaten in Chipotle since February?
How many? That's
3.
just that's
3
ridiculous.
goddamn times.
Insane. What? I've eaten there like
Yeah.
3 times in the last 2 days.
I know. That's one of the things I miss.
I love my
Absolutely.
Chipotle. John asks, what about silver solder?
I've never used silver for wiring. Generally, that's just like for, like you get into those esoteric solders, and that's more for like craft
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
and or like I know like guys who have built like model trains and stuff, like brass, like model, like you use different kinds of solder because you like got to solder this stuff, and then you got to solder this stuff on top of it. So you use a different solder that melts at a lower temperature, so you don't melt the stuff that's on the inside, that's on this layer, and you do stuff like that. That's where you start using all the weird, like the silver and all that shit. I've never used that for a wiring thing. I mean, any old, just good old.
Yeah,
regular
that's all I use. I have a couple different sizes,
solder.
and that's it.
Yeah, I just use use get some real thin stuff for wiring.
that's what I
Don't
use.
need that big fat.
Yeah, Michael, I live in L.A. and you do too. Yes, but I do have a couple of my local spots that I dig that I go to also. Just a lot of them, it's hard to get into at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, and then what brand were the patch base you held up earlier with a Bit-Tree, right?
Those
Yeah.
are both Bit-Tree, yeah. Yeah, the Bit-Tree stuff seems pretty cool. I've used them, Neutrix and Switchcrafts and whatever.
Yeah, we have all Bit-Tree here.
Bit-Trees are nice.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. And it's nice because they're in Glendale. You need one.
And
just to pick it up.
that stuff's an investment, so it's a little, it's expensive on the front end, but knowing that it's going to last you forever, it pays for itself pretty quickly throughout the years.
Yeah. That's another point for the Elcos too. Is like if you do with the ones with any kind of connectors on the back, like no matter what, you can always change your connections later. Like, if you're soldering on an open frame patch bay, you want to make a bunch of changes. It's a pain in the ass. So, at the end of the day, like the ones with the connectors on the back may be more expensive, but it might be in the long run a much better value if you're gonna make changes or if you move. If you think you're ever gonna move, then you might want to consider something with some connectors on the back.
All right, last question here from Michael. Do you melt the solder on the tip or put it on the contact? I do both on XLRs. I'll have some on the contact, and I always tin the tips or I'll tin the wire, and then I always get just a little drip on the tip of the soldering iron.
Yeah. Well, no, you tin the wire, you tin your contact, and then put them together.
Makes it easy.
If you're not soldering that way, then you're doing it wrong.
Very true. Very true. All right, dude. Scott, thank you, man. Appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.
This is I'm sure we'll have a follow up to this. Maybe once you get all your new wiring done, we'll do a follow up at your studio or something.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess at the moment. My webcam is at the one angle it doesn't look like a mess right now.
If you could only see the other side of the room in here, it's probably exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that Who album, the back of that Who album with all the wires. You know?
Right. Oh, well, man, thanks again. I can't wait till we can actually get back in the room together and do some stuff. Be fun. Because I know you got a few ideas that we need to try out. I'm not going to say what they are live right now. We haven't tried them out yet.
My weird science experiments I come up
that
with
are usually pretty cool. So.
And then let us know if you like 7 p.m. better than 6 p.m. because
Oh yeah, everybody, how are we feeling about this going an hour later? I know the West Coast guys probably makes it a little bit easier of work, whatever. But I think we may move this to our normal time to be 7 p.m.
So yeah. So unless you guys don't like 7 p.m., I think 7 p.m. is.
Even if you don't like it, we're going to move it anyway, because that's just because I'm the boss. That's why. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Everybody stay safe. Have a good time.
Hit the like button.
Yes. Hit the like, yo.
Yeah. And, and buy some T-shirts or some mugs or whatever is coming
Everybody
up.
needs a coffee mug. Man, this is cold. I got to get some more coffee in this
because,
thing.
this free stuff, it takes a lot of work,
Oh, yes, it does. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.